Lester Stone is a friend who is dear to my heart. In sharing our lives, he brings joy to each moment. His insightful, curious, creative mind is an inspiration. Lester's stories are rich, and his life is well lived. I am grateful to you for your friendship, Lester, and I love you.
I was born in Kelso, Washington, which is near Mount St. Helens. And when I was very young, my father bought a Ford, and we went from Helena, Montana to Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was quite a trip. In those days, there were no paved roads at all. That was before the days of pavement. Okay? We drove. There were no bridges across any of the streams. You had to go through the water to get across. Right? I mean, that was normal, yeah. And when we crossed the desert, we went on a wooden road made of logs, which are set like this. Right? And just barely wide enough for one car. Every 5 miles it was double width, so 2 cars could get by. We never saw another car. Yeah. And I have driven across the desert there since then, and you can still see some of the old logs sticking up out of the sand. Anyway, so my main job in growing up was going to school. I mean, in my life at home, I did drawings. Other than that, I went to school, and we had a very happy home life. My mother and father got a divorce. Well, my mother had tuberculosis when I was about 7. And and I had a sister, right? And so me and my sister were sent to an orphanage, well, so we wouldn't have to take our chances on getting tuberculosis. So we stayed in that for about 7 years. And then my mother recovered from tuberculosis. She got well, so we went home. Well, my home life was good. And when we were in the orphanage, I didn't have any home life, and so we wanted to go home, of course, but that was not possible. Although our parents came to see us about once a week. Right? And then when I was 14, I went home. And my mother was no longer sick. And so we lived in Oakland, California. And my home life was perfectly normal. I went to school every day. We were living in Annapolis at a place called the Rising Sun Inn, which was an old stagecoach stopping place between Annapolis and Baltimore, built in 1753. And a nice house. We had to wear shoes because the floors were splintery. And the floors were curved from the weight through the years. So the dressers all stuck out like this from the wall. Anyway, it was a nice house. Well, we wanted to buy a house. And a friend of ours owned a house here in Pennsylvania, and she brought us up here to visit. So when we were here, we looked around, and we found a nice house up on the top of the hill in that direction, up on the mountainside. And we were looking at it with the real estate agent. Beautiful house, about twice as big as this one. And we said, how much? He said, well, they want $20,000, but I think you could get it for a little less. So we offered $18,000 and got it. What a wonderful house. Yeah. So I set my studio up in one of the old bedrooms upstairs, and I did a lot of painting. I held a class. When I was a kid, in my teens, I guess, I wanted to be an engineer. Someone told me that, and I didn't know how to get to a school that taught engineering, but I knew that the Naval Academy taught engineering. So someone told me that if I joined the Navy, I would have an opportunity to go to the Naval Academy. So I went right straight down and joined the Navy. I went to San Diego. And while I was in San Diego, I took the examination for the Naval Academy preparatory class and failed it. So I was waiting for another school, and I was out. I had made some little model airplanes, and I was tossing them in the air just outside the barracks on a Sunday morning. A young naval officer came by and came over and talked to me. And he said, be in my office tomorrow at 9 o'clock. So I went to his office, and he said, go get your sea bag. You're going to the Naval Academy preparatory class. So that's how I got into the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy is a truly magnificent school. I enjoyed every minute of it, but it was a lot of hard work. And then, of course, I got a commission in the Navy as an ensign, and I went to Pensacola to flight training. And I went to San Diego, and I joined a torpedo squadron on the USS Lexington. Now, and we were based in San Diego, but our ship was the Lexington. So we would go aboard the ship for naval exercises. Right. And in 1940, I wrecked an airplane. I landed an airplane upside down, and it gave me a bump on my head, which completely wiped out 2 years of my memory. And it still affects my memory. Right? So then, when I got out of the hospital, I went to a utility squadron on Ford Island in Pearl Harbor. And that's where I was when World War II started. And when the Japanese attacked us there, that was very exciting. And then I had, various jobs in the Navy. One of them was in the development of the Navy's first guided missile, which was called the Pelican. So my job was to do the test flying of that missile. So that's what I did for about a year. And then I went to I forget the name. Anyway, in the amphibious business. We were capturing islands out in the Pacific Ocean. And one of them, we captured the Philippine Islands, and I was in on that attack. and went into Leyte Gulf and put 200,000 troops on shore. And then it went, well, when when World War II was winding up, I was at Okinawa for 3 months. That's the whole battle. Okinawa was the largest naval battle ever. And that was 3 months, right? And when we went back to Pearl Harbor, when we had captured Okinawa, then the flagship went back to Pearl Harbor. And when we got to Pearl Harbor, we were ordered to take the Marine 6th Division to Sasebo, Japan, which we did. And you know, with the amphibious commands, we would take hundreds of ships with soldiers and invade someplace. Then the flagship was finished. We would go get another job. Well, the other job was to take an army division into the inland sea in Japan and occupy Kure, K-U-R-E. It was a naval base, Japan's largest naval base. It was in the middle of the inland sea. It was about 15 miles from Hiroshima. So we got the troops offloaded and we were free to do whatever we had to do. And we offloaded a Jeep and drove up to Hiroshima, which was very, very interesting. The bomb had killed about 100,000 people there. The bomb itself was set to burst about 1,000 feet in the air. When the bomb exploded, it exploded downward and it wiped out the whole city. Peggy was the most wonderful girl in this world, ever, okay? She studied the subject of how to make the person you are with feel good about himself. That was her lifelong policy. She had hundreds of friends. But she lived in Annapolis on Southgate Avenue, and I met her, and I told her she was going to marry me. Well, so eventually she did. Yeah. But she was with me all through World War II, all the various places, Japan, and the Hawaiian Islands, and other. Peggy had heart trouble all of her life, and she was, I guess she was just under 70 when she died in 1984 of a heart attack. I met her at a dance. You see, the midshipmen have a dance about once a month in a sort of big hall, and it's a big place, right? And I had never paid much attention to that because I was doing something else. Anyway, I went to that dance one night, and she was dancing with somebody else and went past me, and I said, "That's the girl." So I went right straight out and I cut on them, right? And I danced with her for about 30 seconds until somebody else cut, right? And then I followed through on that. But, well, I went out I found out where she lived, and I went out to see her. And I kept going out to see her. And then when I graduated, we got married. And when I went to flight training, she went with me to flight training, Pensacola. And then, well, we were just together all the time. We lived in Coronado. And you see, during World War II, we were separated at one point for about a year. And let me tell you that it was a very successful and a very beautiful marriage. We did not fight with each other for anything at all. And she apparently knew how to handle it. I'm not sure I knew how. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, we were living in Pearl City, which is a little town on the edge of Pearl Harbor. And then she was with me all through the war, right? And we have 4 children, three girls and 1 boy. Our son died about 10 years ago from over smoking. He got cancer of the chest, which migrated to his head. And the girls are fine. One of them lives in Gettysburg. That's our youngest, Susie. Judy, our eldest, lives in Dickerson, Maryland, which is straight south of here on the Potomac River. And Margie lives in Albany, New York. And they all have children of their own here. Judy can paint, but she's just not interested in it. She can do it quite well, but her interests are just simply elsewhere, yeah. Well, that's basically, they were good children. They got a good education. Well, I guess they just grew up like most other children grow up. I mean, well, their biggest job always was the school they were going to. And so I see them quite often. I started painting when I was a little child. I don't remember starting. I've always painted. So when I was in the Navy, I just painted whenever I could. You know, just like some people play golf, you know. So that was my, I painted instead of playing golf, right? And I have loved painting all of my life. And so I've done quite a bit. You can see some of these pictures that I have in here. I have 4 paintings on the wall back there that I did in Japan. I've been to Japan about 10 times. And with my family, I lived there for 2.5 years. So I got to know quite a bit about Japan and the people. And it was a very, very valuable experience for me. And I made large numbers of Japanese friends. But well, it's just that I paint all the time, right? So, and the pictures that you see in here are some examples, right? And I do mostly portraits, watercolor or oil or pastel. It's just when I was a child, I had to do it. So that was my inspiration. But I love people, and my paintings are all for beauty. I don't paint historical pictures as such, or scientific pictures. I just do paintings that I love. Okay, and I paint for the pure personal pleasure of doing it. So And I have a class. I have had a painting class since about 1970. And I have, some students have been with me all of that time. And so I have a small group, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 at a time, right? And we just get together once a week and paint. And now we're painting on a farm in just south of Waynesboro, Ed Hennickel's farm. And so, every Monday I teach. Right. And I think that sometime this summer I will have an exhibition of my students' paintings, probably up at Penn National. I don't paint them just to sell, although if someone wants a portrait, I paint the portrait and I charge for it. And I have prices on my paintings, but it has never been of any concern to me to sell them. I just as soon keep them. As you see these in here. Well, I enjoyed painting it. I had taken some photographs of some seagulls, and I selected one and made this design. And it's just that as the years have gone by, I like it more and more. Well, of course, I made some bigger pictures also, but this one always sticks in my mind. Well, I've done a number of nude studies, and in each case, the woman has come to me and said, "Lester, I would love to model for you." So I didn't ask any of them. So then that's what I did. Yes. So I have one on the wall back here, and one upstairs. And I'm doing another one now. I know exactly why they chose me. That picture of Joni that I did, that one, and this one, I put them in a show in Gettysburg. And very suddenly, 2 women came to me, this one and the one that's upstairs, and said they would love to model for me. And the one I'm doing now is Jordan Kuharski. I had a show up in Penn National last year about this time. And some young women came from Gettysburg to the show. And I was very busy during the show with talking to people right now. The 3 girls came over, and Jordan asked me if she could model for me. So I gave her a card to put her telephone number on. But the 2 other girls were there, and I had met a girl while I was in a life class with Betty Roby, and one day I was at a show over there in Gettysburg, and a young woman came through the crowd and came straight to me. And I said, "What is your name?" She said, "It's Courtney." And then I remembered her. She was in the life class. I had never seen her dressed. Well, so once she had to tell me who she was, right? Yeah. That was Courtney, yeah. And at that same day, same time, it was when Jordan asked if she could model for me. Lovely girl. 1933, I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. I had a phonograph record of Fritz Kreisler playing the violin, and I decided that I was going to learn to play the violin. But I did not have a violin, and I could not borrow one, so I went over to the woodworking shop at the Naval Academy and got some wood and made this. So this took about 3 months to make it. And of course I was a midshipman and I had to keep my room spotlessly clean all the time. And I think they wanted to kick me out for having my room in gross disorder. Anyway, I did have some trouble, yeah, but I did get it made. And then I still couldn't play it. So I would practice, and it was not very good for the other midshipmen to have to listen to this. Anyway, here it is. It has a fact. This tone is a little bit shallow because the panels do not have the reversed curve that all violins have. The top is made of spruce, and the back is made of maple. Those are the normal woods for making violins. And the handle is made of maple, and the pegs are made of ivory. And the little board back here is ivory, and this is ivory. Not ivory. I'm sorry, it's not ivory. Ebony. Ebony. Yeah, that's the kind of wood. Ebony. This, and the keys. And I bought this at a store. One of the other midshipmen played this in the orchestra, in the Naval Academy Orchestra. I can't finger it anymore. Yeah, nice tone. Yeah. Well, you must understand that time does not pass by always at the same rate. Sometimes it goes by a little bit slower, and sometimes it goes by a little bit faster. If it goes by a little slower, we call it time dilation. And if it goes a little faster, we call it time compression. That is that time either slows down a little or speeds up a little. Now, so in any case, I have endeavored over the past several years to write something about that, to sort of explain it, and I have had some success at that. It's simply because by nature, I try to figure things out. And so I got a hold of this one, and I have spent quite a bit of time at it. Well, time, of course, is something very real, and we live our lives by time, what we do through time. Right? Now, time sometimes goes by a little bit slower. On the surface of the Earth, it runs a little bit slower than it does out in space. Just a little bit, right? That, I don't think you need for me to give you any numbers, but that is 3.47 multiplied by 10 to the minus 17. So it's a very small amount, right? And Well, I came up with them just by sitting right here and with a piece of paper and figuring them out. I did not share this with anybody else. I just worked it out by myself. And what we call time dilation is a very small amount here on Earth, but out in space there are some celestial bodies in which that dilation is very great, runs almost to being infinite. And that's how some of those bodies in outer space are built. And of course, I'm not familiar with all of the astronomical information about them, but the subject has been very important to me. It's important to me just because I'm inquisitive. And there are some papers on the general subject which ordinary people don't read. I mean, the Earth's gravitational field is made out of time. That is a function of time. And so it's just that time does not go by always at the same rate. And that's basically it. And the equation I have written on that little piece of paper there, that little card, what I have written here is that any acceleration is a function of time. And the equation is that A, which means acceleration, is equal to twice the square of the speed of light multiplied by the time dilation gradient. Now the terminology there is not easily explainable, but there's that simple equation matches acceleration, like the Earth's gravity acceleration, as a function of time. And this little equation would be important to scientists, but not to the ordinary person. Yeah. No, the explanation is simply that time does not always go by at the same rate. To make the Earth's gravity, the acceleration of gravity, you explain it as a function of time. And as a function of time, it is a very small number, about 1.5 multiplied by 10 to the minus 17 power. So very tiny amount, right? And that makes the Earth's gravity, right? And that's about the explanation. Yeah. My job was a communication officer for an air wing. That's several squadrons. And I had one of my instruments was a coding machine, which I kept in a safe. And we got a message one day, and I broke it, and it said, "They're going to attack us. Get ready. Don't alarm the public." So I took that in and handed it to my boss and left. I don't know what I did with it. But what I did is I called the photographic laboratory, which was in our charge, the Fleet Photographic Laboratory, and told them to get the photographers out and cover it. So all those beautiful pictures you now see were taken by those lads, right? And then my boss called me in, and he said, after a little while, and he said, "I understand that we've taken some photographs." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Go get them and burn them." So I went and I got the photographs, and I built a fire, and I put one of them in the fire, and I said, "I ain't going to do this." So I took them back to the photo lab, gave them to the chief petty officer there, told him what had happened, and asked him to take care of them. Those pictures you now see about Pearl Harbor were taken by those young men. I didn't admit that to anybody. Well,
I wouldn't.
there was a bit of hysteria, yeah.
So where were you when we were bombed?
When the Japanese attacked us, I was in my house in Pearl City. Pearl City is a little peninsula just on the north shore of Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is pretty round, and the entrance to the ocean is at the southern end. And the northern end is a little peninsula, which is called Pearl City. That's where I lived. So I got up Sunday morning, and I got dressed, and I heard a noise, and I went outside, and a Japanese plane was flying over my house, about as high as this roof. You see the pilot, and I knew what had happened, because I knew what the situation was. I expected them to attack. I knew they were going to attack because of the codes that I had broken. And I had a young ensign staying with us that night, Ensign Zimmerman. And well, Peggy knew what was happening. And Zimmerman and I jumped in a car that we had and drove around to the boat landing and went over to Fort Island. Fort Island is the island in the middle of Pearl Harbor. All the battleships were tied up to stockades along the south side of Fort Island. I got to my squadron, and well, one of the things I did was I got there before anybody else did. The other officers had to drive from Honolulu to Pearl Harbor, which is about an hour's drive, and so I got there first. So I had machine guns put in we had some airplanes which were parked out near the airfield, right? I put machine guns in them, and we were shooting at the Japanese airplanes which were strafing the field. We were about roughly a block from the Arizona. The Arizona got hit and blew up. And a big sheet of steel, I guess about as big as that roof, came down and stuck edgeways on the ground between the airplanes out there. And some other things were falling, and a little book fell down. I reached down and picked it up. It was the damage control pamphlet from the Arizona. So I tucked it in my shirt, thinking that, well, someone might want this later on. So then I had that for several years, and I sent it, when they built the monument, I sent that book to them to put in the monument. Well, it was a busy day.
And you were in charge of the radio shack?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, my squadron at that time, the squadron that I was in, serviced the fleet. We did photographic missions for the ships, the battle practices, and things like that. And whatever photography the fleet needed, we supplied it. We had our own airplanes, and we, photographers, and we covered it. So first thing I did when I got there was to got the photographers out to cover it. Well, what else could I do? I mean, I couldn't shoot back.
And was there power to the radio shack where you were all the time? Was the power affected at all?
No. The battleship, the California, was parked in that little body of water by the electric powerhouse that we had on Ford Island. And it sank and broke the water line to the powerhouse. So we had no power. But what I had done about a week earlier, I knew things was going to come to a head. I mean, that was obvious to me. I had the coding machine, I broke all the codes, right? And so I knew the Japanese were going to attack. I did not know exactly when, but when it happened, I recognized it. But the machine guns at the airplanes that we had parked on the ground, and I did a number of things, and I went out where the airplanes were to, if possible, direct the gunfire, right? The Japanese were strafing the field, and we were shooting at the Japanese planes, and we shot one of them down. And when the Arizona blew up, the damage control pamphlet fell on the ground by my feet, and I picked it up and sent it to them later on.
And did you have a generator, a backup generator?
Well, I guess about a week or so, or a few days before the Japanese attacked, I went over to the Navy Yard, which was where I was on was Ford Island, was an island right in the middle of Pearl Harbor, with an airway, landing field on it. And I had gone over to the Navy Yard and scrounged a motor generator about, I guess it was about 8 or 10 feet high. I mean, it was a big thing. And I had it brought over, and I set it up right outside the hangar where my radio shack was. So when the California sank and broke that water line to our powerhouse, I still had that motor generator. And so we had no electricity on the island except me. So I provided all the communications for the patrol planes who were based on Pearl Harbor. And we had 2 utility squadrons.
So you had already had it hooked up.
I already had it hooked up.
Good planning.
Wild guessing. Well, no, not entirely, because I was interested.
Yes.
And I had the coding machine. And we got a little message that said, "They're going to hit us. Don't alarm the public." So I knew.
Tell me about when the battleship, the Oklahoma, sank.
Well, the battleships were, this is the island. The battleships were tied up to bollards along the side. I guess there were 4 or 5 battleships tied up to those. so well, I was out there. The Oklahoma got hit and it rolled over. Now I couldn't see that. There were a stand of trees between me and the battleships. There were trees along here. The battleships were here. I was standing right there. I didn't see the Oklahoma tip over, but I was about a block from it when I tipped over. I do not remember all of my motions, but I do remember that I was right there. See, the Oklahoma was just in front of the Arizona. Arizona sank. And the Arizona was hit by a bomb that went through the forward turret right down into the magazine, and the magazine exploded. So it blew the ship all to hell.
Wow. What else do you
It was
remember?
very noisy.
Oh, it's going to be very noisy. What else do you remember about that day? Did you fight all day long? How long did it last?
Well, the attack was in 2 waves, about an hour apart. So that was, I don't remember exactly, maybe an hour and a half altogether.
Did they had the planes that came in, and then did they also have submarines that came into the harbor?
Only 1 submarine got in. They had 100 submarines there. And they expected our ships to go out, but we were in. It was probably better for us to have the ships in port that day than to have them out at sea. They would all have been sunk.
So they had their submarines outside the harbor,
Yeah.
ready to attack their ships.
We sank one of the submarines that morning just before they attacked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of their submarines got into the harbor, and
One of their submarines got into the harbor, a small submarine. I think it had 2 men on it, something like that, I don't know. And I guess I went up to the officers' quarters for lunch. And we were there at that part of the island. We could see right into the harbor, right there, the north part of the harbor. And there was a hospital ship there. And one of the Japanese submarines had gotten under the hospital ship to hide. And then he had to get out of there to get air. He had a motor launch, a 30-foot motor launch there. And there was a man in the bow of the motor launch with a long pole. And we knew that the submarine was there, and he hit the submarine with his pole and backed away, and our patrol boats went in and sank the submarine.
wow, high tech.
Just like that, yeah. Depth charges, yeah.
Wow. And he found it with a pole.
But, well, Paul felt for him that way, yeah. Well, it's not all that funny.
But it's not funny at all. It's when you think about the technology that we have today,
Yeah.
you know, they would have been able to figure out where it was with modern technology, but
Well, we knew where it was. And we knew the depth of the water, so we knew how he couldn't go very deep. So we could feel him with a pole.
and when they blew up the submarine, it didn't affect the hospital ship.
No, it just sank the
It just
submarine.
sank the submarine. Wow. So whatever happened to The guy that was with you in the morning.
Zimmerman.
Yeah.
They ordered him to go to the Shaw. The Shaw was a destroyer in a dry dock across the water from the island. See, like this is Ford Island, Pearl Harbor is like this. The Navy Yard was here, big Navy, and the Shaw was in a dry dock here. He was ordered to the Shaw. Now I don't know the sequence of events, but I don't know whether he even got on the Shaw before it sank, but he got on it afterwards. The front end of the ship was blown off. And the Navy Yard put a temporary bow, and they brought it back to the States and fixed it up. I suppose he was on it then. Well, I would want them to think that I was basically kind. I love people. Yeah. And I hope, of course, that they can enjoy some of my paintings which might still be around. And you see, I have no way of knowing, but I think some of them will.